When we think of Westminster Abbey today, we picture coronations, royal weddings, or the solemn beauty of Poets' Corner. But in the Middle Ages, it was also a treasury, one of the most secure in the realm. Gold, silver, and relics of immense value were stored within its walls. To attempt to rob it was not just theft, it was sacrilege, a crime against both crown and church. And one man learned this lesson in the most chilling way possible, through his own skin. The story takes us to the early 14th century. His name was Richard of Pudlicott, a London merchant who had fallen into debt and ruin. Desperation drove him to plan what was then called the Great Robbery of the King's Treasury at Westminster Abbey. With a handful of accomplices, he managed to break into the Abbey in 1303 and steal part of the royal treasure. This wasn't petty theft. We're talking about jewels, gold, and items entrusted to the Abbey for safekeeping by none other than King Edward I. The crime was staggering, not just in its audacity, but in its implications. The Abbey was supposed to be inviolable, protected by God himself. For thieves to plunder it so brazenly was an insult to both heaven and the English crown. Chroniclers of the time wrote of the public's shock. How could such a holy place be violated? Now the aftermath is where things get truly grim. Richard of Pudlicott was eventually captured, tried, and sentenced. Accounts suggest he died in prison, though some say he was executed. Either way, what happened next is well recorded. His body was flayed after death, his skin carefully stripped away. And then, in a spectacle of justice and warning, it was nailed to the door of the Abbey's treasury. Imagine the scene. Pilgrims and Londoners passing by the Abbey, seeing the human hide stretched and fastened like some grotesque banner. It was a statement carved into flesh, a declaration that to violate the sanctity of the Abbey was to lose not just your life, but even your skin, the very covering of your humanity. It's important to note the symbolism here. In medieval thought, the skin was a kind of boundary between the inner self and the outer world. To strip it away was to unmask a man completely, to expose him in death as a sinner unworthy of human dignity. And to hang that skin on the Abbey door, that was theater. Justice wasn't quiet in the Middle Ages. It was performed in public, designed to instill fear and awe. There's a certain irony, too. Pudlicott had stolen from the treasury, but in the end, his own skin became part of its furnishings. The Abbey door bore his remains as a permanent reminder, almost like a cursed relic. Some chroniclers claim the skin stayed there for centuries, until at least the Reformation, when such macabre symbols were swept away. And Pudlicott wasn't alone in suffering this fate. Flaying, while rare in England, was not unknown in medieval Europe. It was reserved for crimes considered especially heinous: treason, sacrilege, or betrayal. In the case of Westminster, the punishment fit the crime: to rob the House of Kings, and God was to lose even the right to a proper burial. Looking back now, it's easy to shudder. Was it necessary to nail a man's skin to a church door? Or was it simply a society's way of writing fear into the architecture of daily life? After all, anyone entering the treasury after 1303 would first have to pass the tanned hide of the man who dared to steal from it. A message, quite literally, nailed into history. Today, Westminster Abbey is remembered for pageantry and tradition. Few visitors think about the skin that once adorned its doors. But the story of Richard of Pudlicott reminds us that medieval justice was not only about retribution, it was about spectacle, about making the body into a warning. The skin of one thief became a barrier stronger than locks and keys. And maybe that's the lasting lesson. In an age when law was inseparable from religion, punishment had to be seen, even touched, to be believed. The Abbey may have been robbed, but in the end, it turned the thief himself into part of its defenses. So the next time you see Westminster's grand doors, imagine, centuries ago, the faint, leathery trace of a man's skin nailed there for all to see. History can be gilded and glorious, but sometimes it is also grotesque. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and subscribe for more deep dives into the darkest and most fascinating corners of history.